Alright, so today's tutorial will be a little more complex. It's quite technical and it's going to take quite a long time to really understand what's going on. So this is real-world hacking, literally. And it's going to demonstrate one from compromise of a specific service and us gaining access to a specific server, all the way to elevating ourselves towards the control plane, and then we can start seeing resources across the AWS account. So this is a little more complex, a little more technically challenging, but if you watch to the end, you really understand what's going on, and this makes you a better security professional, makes you better as a hacker too. And of course, when it comes to AWS security, who else to learn but from Mr. Hacker Loy? Because I have all 12 AWS certificates, and that's extremely rare, and it demonstrates true expertise in AWS. And of course, if you love this kind of videos like hacking, AWS security, cloud security, hacking the mobile device and stuff like that, subscribe to the channel because you don't want to get hacked too. And the even better part is if you turn on notification to this YouTube channel, you get notified when you get hacked. So now in terms of architecture of things, you first have the hacker. And of course, in this case, we have Mr. Hacker Loy, your BFF, who is going to be the one that will be targeting those services. And number two, you would have an AWS account, and in your AWS account, you would have resources within it. So in this case, we have a specific EC2 that is running, and of course, in this case, it's going to be running a service called Jenkins. So this is an open source CI/CD pipeline management kind of service, and of course, it's free. So lots of companies, lots of businesses install it in order to manage their pipeline. And what we are going to do today is really interesting because we'll be targeting this EC2 server, and then we gain access to it through an operating system command injection. And from there, we'll be able to elevate ourselves into the whole of the AWS account. And from here, we'll be able to look at other resources like your S3 bucket that is going to be storing lots of different information, objects within it. And we could pick into it, we could download things inside of it, and then be able to gain access to them, viewing them, and being able to do anything we want with those data. And not just that, we'll be learning how to investigate on it using a tool or a service called Amazon Detective that can help us look into who executed certain instructions, who managed to gain access into the Jenkins server, and did they take any data or credentials out into the personal computer. So all in all, this is going to be a really cool tutorial. Now, before we jump straight into hacking, remember kids, hacking is illegal. Remember to ask your mom for permission first before you start hacking. So I've already started my Kala Linux machine, and you can see here on the left we have a sign in. So sign in to Jenkins is the one. So let's go ahead and enter our username. So in this case with Hacker Loy, we have the password of 123456778. Just kidding, that's not my password, but it's a pretty cool password. I mean, you should use it too. So I sign in and I'll be able to see the service over here. So let me zoom out a little more so it's easier for you to see. And something really interesting about Jenkins is that when you click under Manage Jenkins, there is a part of this that allows you to run operating system commands, and that's super cool. So what I can see here is if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see something here that is called the script console, and this is the one that we are targeting. So once you go in and click onto script console, you'll be brought over into an interesting page, and this is where it says the following: type in an arbitrary groovy script and execute it on the server. So this is the one where we are going to enter in whatever code we want and be able to possibly gain access to the AWS account through a credentials called instance metadata. And I have the following example code here that helps us get the internal IP address, meaning that where we're heading over into right now is the public IP address. But in our case, what we really want to do is say, hey, what is your internal address? What is your internal subnet? And possibly there are other IP addresses within the subnet that we can target without using enumeration script that proactively or actively scan against all these different targets. So this is something that we can do as part of enumeration. And what we can see here is the following internal IP address. And you can see the IP address of 172.3.1.3.1.211. So meaning that all the IP addresses from 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 254 are likely going to be IP addresses that we can target. They could be alive, so we don't have to scan them directly across this range, but we can, in a sense, be able to possibly identify them by looking at the subnet of things. And if we jump over into the AWS console right here, you see something interesting is that in your virtual service have the ability to be associated with an identity and access management role. So in that case, if you click on the security, you can see a specific IAM role that's been assigned to this EC2 virtual server. What it means is that this EC2 virtual server may have access to other resources like your S3 buckets that can contain your objects, your content, your images, your videos, and so on, or possibly other services in order to orchestrate things, in order to do things. So in that case, if you click onto the EC2 role, you can see right here, when we scroll down further, there are certain permissions policies. So in this case, we can see excessively permissive permissions like S3 full access that's been given or granted to this EC2 instance. And we also have CloudWatch agent, we have other revoke older sessions, so on and so forth. So these are the permissions that we're able to use from the EC2. And then after that, we can target other resources inside the AWS account. And how we can do that is going over to 169.254.169.254. So here's a script in Jenkins that we can run, and it's going to look exactly like this. So if you see over here, I will be explaining to you what is going on. So if you see over here, I'm going to copy and paste it, and what this is targeting, as you can see from the first part, is we're going to execute onto a curl which gets the EC2 role name, and after which we get the credentials. So the credentials are your access key, your secret key, your session token that's been granted or given assignment to this EC2. And from there, we can print out the credentials from there. So once you're ready, go ahead and click run. And if I scroll all the way down, you can see the following. We got the access key ID, we got a secret access key, and we have the token right here. So this is it. It's game over. Just copy paste this into your computer. You're done. You have access to that credentials right now. So what you can see here is that I've already exported them into my Kali Linux machine. And what I can do now that I've exported this is to start enumerating things from a completely different computer, because I could possibly have a script somewhere else and I can start running them directly from here. So for example, I want to confirm on my identity. I enter AWS STS get caller identity, hit enter on this, and it helps us confirm that we are using these credentials. So you can see the following: assume role EC2 followed by the instance ID. I can also do the following of AWS S3LS to see what are the list of S3 buckets that are inside the AWS account. And we can see right here, we have Hacker Lloyd test bucket, we have CloudFormation templates, we have something on the software bill of material as well. Now perhaps I want persistent access, and I can do the following of say AWS on create an identity and access management user so that we can use the access key and secret key to have continuous access into the AWS account. So let's go ahead and try to create it and see what happens. So I enter the following AWS IAM create user -- username hacker Lloyd. Let's see if we get a hit. And it's going to state the following. All right. An error occurred, access denied. So if you recall, when we went back earlier to the EC2 IAM role, we did not have the ability to access identity and access management service, so we're not able to create that user. Now, what's really interesting next is we want to look into the virtual server itself and see if there are any credentials that we can gain access to. So what I want to see here is to go ahead and set up a listener, NC NLVP 4444. So we're starting up our listener in our Kali Linux machine. And I hit back into script console, and I have the following script right here, which starts the netcat, targeting a specific IP address of this port and this executable. So I click run. And once I'm done with this, I hit back over here. It states the following: connect to from, all right, 211, which is the IP address of the Jenkins server. So with that, I can enter who am I, I get Jenkins. I can enter pre-working directory var lib Jenkins. So what we're going to do now is to upgrade this shell to something a little more interactive, and it's easier for us to be able to interact with the session. So let's go ahead and do the following of the Python 3-c followed by import pty followed by pty.spawn followed by /bin bash, and then once we're ready, go ahead and hit enter on this, and then we do a Control-Z, and then followed by stt rar-echo foreground, hit enter on that, and then we enter export term equal xterm. Okay, so once we're done, then enter clear, and who am I, print working directory. Let's go over to var html ls, and we can see a lot of different files over here, and some of them can possibly contain credentials that we need to connect to other instances within the virtual private cloud. Testdb.php definitely look pretty suspicious. So if I enter the following of cat testdb.php, I hit enter on this, you can see right here, we got the credentials. We have the username, we have the password, and we have the following database information, and it's connecting over into the database. So this again highlights that we're able to get credentials directly by having access into the virtual server. And while all of this is happening, as a security professional, you want to know what you can do in AWS to detect a threat and then to be able to investigate on it so that you're able to take action. So from here, you can see the following. We have the results from Amazon GuardDuty, which is a threat detection service. And I have an unauthorized access IAM user instance credential exfiltration outside AWS. So this was what we did earlier. We exported the credentials into a Kali Linux machine, and we started running some calls from there. So if you see here, it states the following: credentials created exclusively for an EC2 instance using instance role EC2 have been used from external IP address and so on. So we can see the region where this is occurring. The severity is high because someone managed to take the permissions from the virtual server, and that's concerning. So if you scroll down further, we can see the access key, we can see the access key ID, and all of this different information. So what we can do further is we can investigate with Detective. So this is an investigation service from Amazon. And what we can see here is I can investigate onto the finding itself, the EC2, the account, or the role session, as well as all of this affiliated IP addresses. So what I'm really keen on is the role session. Let's go ahead and click on it. So when I clicked on it, I now pivot over into the detective service, and I'm able to see the following. So the right side are the findings information from Amazon GuardDuty, a threat detection service. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and close that. So if you see here, we have the EC2 role. Okay, so this is the session name and the assumed role of EC2. All right, and we can see the following information with it. So there is a API simulate principal policy, API described instances was invoked, and so on. So all these are suspicious behaviors coming in from this specific role. And what I love most is the visualization from Amazon Detective. So if you see here, I can scroll in further and I can see that, hey, Kali Linux, which is the one that we've been using all this while, is highly suspicious. It's a suspicious entity. And I can scroll to other parts of things that are affiliated with it. So for example, I have the EC2 role with the instance, I have the EC2 role itself, and I can start running investigation and see what's going on. Say for example, I've selected this entity, I click run investigation, and perhaps I want to see what's going on this last 24 hours. I clicked on that, I click confirm, and the investigation is running on the back end for us automatically. And at the same time, while I'm doing the investigation, I can go ahead and see, hey, what is this linked to? It's linked to newly observed user agent, newly observed ASO, and all these different other findings, other relations, other entities related to all these different other entities. So I don't have to go back to CloudTrail, CloudWatch. I don't have to look into the raw logs and try to do the association myself. All this is done automatically through the finding group. And while that is happening, instead of clicking around investigation, I can click onto the entity itself, which will give us a summary of what is going on inside this entity. So if you see over here, we have the following of AWS role, the principal ID, and the AWS account. So if I scroll down further, we can see the investigations. All right, we can see the findings associated with this resource. So we have number one, credentials for instance role, EC2 role, were used from an external IP address. So that's exactly what we did earlier. I also run other APIs like simulate principal policy. I also ran describe instance as part of enumeration. So all this was detected very quickly from Amazon Got Duty. And now we're able to see the findings associated with this specific entity. All right. And if you want to see the overall API call volume, you can see them right here. And perhaps the scope time, I want to change this a little. I want to say, give me the last 6 hours. I update the scope time. And from here, we are able to see there are some calls that were made, successful calls, as well as failed calls. So let's go ahead and click on it, set time interval. All right, so we have now set a time interval, and we're able to see certain observed IP addresses. And we can see right here, we have the following from Singapore. All right, so I have 116.14187, and I have IAM. I have create users. So remember this? This was the call that we made from Kali Linux trying to create a persistent access of IAM user. Do you recall earlier we're doing an investigation? And you can see right here, there was a CloudTrail management actions map to persistence miter tactic. So I only ran a specific API call. And you can see right here, there is persistence. I can click onto it. The adversary is trying to maintain their foothold. So we can see that very quickly from here. Okay. And we can click onto indicators. There's a new user agent. There is persistence of create IAM principal. So you can see the following. IAM create user was invoked from the Kali Linux machine, and it was a failed call. In an earlier investigation, I was running much more API calls. So in this case, when you look at this EC2 role, we observe anomalous behavior for EC2 role from this date to this date, which might be indicative of compromise. So if I scroll down further, you can see the following, discovery. So we're trying to do describe instances, list policy, list role. So we're trying to look and enumerate inside the AWS account. And if you click onto indicators here, you can see the following. We have geolocation, ASO, new geolocation, new user agent. So all these other telemetries has been gathered from all the logs that you have, like your CloudTrail logs, your query logs, your VPC flow logs. So it makes investigation a lot easier with Amazon Detective here. Now, another great feature of Amazon Detective is that we are able to search for a specific instance. So if you see here, I have the instance of the WordPress that is running also Jenkins server, and I go over to search, I paste it over here, I click search, I get the instance ID, I can click onto it, and from here we can see what are the findings associated with it. For example, should not have a public IP. So these are findings from Security Hub, which is a cloud security posture management service. And it can also be Inspector, which is a vulnerability management service, and so on and so forth. So perhaps I want to take a look at the past maybe 7 days. I can click onto update scope time, and we can see more information or findings associated with this resource. At the same time, I can scroll down further. I can look at all this inbound, outbound traffic. So I can click onto this one. Set time interval. All right, I scroll down further and we can see, okay, which one has more traffic. So we have the inbound traffic. All right, we also have the outbound traffic. So let's see any outbound traffic. So we have outbound traffic to 161. We have outbound traffic of local port 108. So all these are different details that we can get very quickly without having to look into the raw logs itself. Now going further, I want to look at this specific IP address that is going to port 8080. So I just want to look at IP address that is coming from 116, so equal this followed by /32, hit enter on that, and we got a couple of information like port 8080. So it means that someone is accessing your, say, Jenkins server if you know that it's installed on, say, the default port. And from there, we can look at the distinct count of ports over time. We can look at the remote ports. We can look at the distinct IP addresses over time and all this different data. And from the earlier signals, I can also enter this specific IP address followed by /32 and see how is it interacting with some of my local IP addresses. So of course, in the real world, the reverse shell will be somewhere out there on the internet. But in this case, I'm just demonstrating things are running within the virtual private cloud. So from here, you can see the following. We have this IP address, we have port 4444, and there's traffic going on here in this specific port, which was the setup for the reverse shell. Alright, so this is it. I hope you found it useful. Hope you found it valuable in learning about AWS security. We'll learn about threat detection. We'll learn about threat investigation. We'll look at reverse shells. We look at hijacking into a Jenkins server. So this was pretty interesting. So if you like this type of videos, subscribe to the channel, turn on notification, stay tuned for even more interesting tutorials coming your way.